Psalm 100, we'll begin with verse 1. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. In parts of Mexico, hot springs and cold springs are found side by side. And because of the convenience of this natural phenomenon, people often bring their laundry and they boil their clothes in the hot springs, and then they rinse them in the cold springs. And one day, a tourist who was watching this procedure commented to his Mexican guide and said, I imagine that they think old Mother Nature is pretty generous to supply so much clean, hot, and cold water here side by side for their free use." And the guide replied, "No, senor, there is much grumbling because she supplies no soap." Now, isn't that like some people? You just can't please them. It's hard for humans to be satisfied. An anonymous author wrote this wonderful piece describing the irony of his time, which was a few years ago, but not many, just a few. He said, "The paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings, but shorter tempers. Wider freeways, but narrower viewpoints. We spend more, but we have less. We buy more, but enjoy it less. We have bigger houses, but smaller families. More conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees, but less common sense. More knowledge, but less judgment. More experts, but more problems. More medicines, but less wellness. We have multiplied our possessions, but reduced our values. We talk too much, love too seldom. We hate too often. We have learned to make a living, but not a life. We've added years to life, but not life to our years. We've been all the way to the moon and back. We have trouble crossing the street to meet our neighbor. We've cleaned up the air, but polluted our souls. We've split the atom, but not our prejudice. We have higher incomes, but lower morals. We've become high on quantity, but short on quality. These are the times of tall men and short characters, steep profits and shallow relationships. These are the times of more leisure but less fun, more kinds of food but less nutrition. These are the days of two incomes but more divorces, of fancier houses but broken homes. It's a time when there is much in the show window, but nothing in the storehouse. Well, this is the time of year when even the most callous people are pressured to take stock of their lives and be thankful. And so today I just want to look at a few moments and consider the things that we should be thankful to God for. Howard Beecher, Henry Howard Beecher, who was a famous preacher of the past, once had this to say about being thankful. If one should give me a dish of sand and tell me that there were particles of iron in it, I might look for it with my eyes and search for them with my clumsy fingers and be unable to detect them. But let me take a magnet and sweep through it, and now it would draw itself almost invisibly, draw the particles by the mere power of attraction. The thankless heart, like my fingers in the sand, discovers no mercies. But let that thankful heart sweep through the day as the magnet finds iron, and so it will find in every hour some heavenly blessings. Only the iron in God's sand is the purest gold. I want you to imagine using the magnet of thanksgiving to sweep through your life. And let it pick up God's gold in the sand of your existence. And when we make a sweep like that, we're going to find many unexpected things to be thankful for. Health, security, our family and friends, work and play, and the people in our neighborhood that we've come to know. All these are obvious things that we can be thankful for. And we're all different, and we have distinctive things and people that we're thankful for. They're God's gold that we find in our lives if we only have the wisdom to look in the right places. I heard a story about a man named Harry who had a wife and two kids. And he worked in a local factory. He bowled on Tuesday nights. He went to church with his family on Sundays. But Harry yearned for more. And then his uncle Elmo came to live with him. Now, Elmo was an old salt who had spent most of his life on the water, first as a merchant marine during the war, and then he was off on trawlers in whatever seafaring vehicle that he could sign in onto. And he never married. The kids loved to listen to his stories about the sea, especially about hidden treasures. And Harry was not above also delighting in the tales that Elmo told. And Elmo always ended his stories with an assurance that he had a map leading to the largest treasure ever. Soon Elmo died. Well, the family gave him a proper funeral and they mourned appropriately. And soon, however, Harry's curiosity got the better of him. And he dug into to Elmo's belongings, his papers, and especially an old suitcase that had a lock on it. And in that suitcase, Harry found the map. And so eagerly he unfolded it and he studied it closely. And after some time, he realized that Elmo had drawn a map that led directly to Harry's home and to the family there. And Elmo had found his treasure there as his last bequest to Harry. Elmo had reminded Harry that that is where he would find his greatest treasure also. But one class of things that we should be thankful for is not so obvious. We need to find what we can to be thankful for, even in the hard times. The Dutch Jewish Christian by the name of Corrie ten Boom tells about an incident that taught her this principle of giving thanks in all things. And I've mentioned this before, but I had to mention it today again. See, it was during World War II. And Carrie and her sister, Betsy, had been laboring or had been harboring Jewish people in their homes so that they wouldn't be imprisoned. But they themselves ended up being imprisoned in Ravensbrück camp because they were hiding Jewish Christians. Their barracks was extremely crowded, and it was infested with fleas. And one morning they read in their tattered Bible from 1 Thessalonians the reminder to rejoice in all things. And Betsy said, Corrie, we've got to give thanks to God for fleas. But Betsy was persuasive. And even though Corrie had replied, no way, I am not giving thanks to God for fleas, she did. She did thank God even for the fleas. Well, during the months that followed, they found that their barracks had been left relatively free. And they could do a Bible study. They could talk openly and even pray in the barracks. And it was their only place of refuge. And several months later, they learned that the reason that the guards never entered their barracks, didn't bother them, was because of those stupid fleas. So, can you find something, even in the hardest times of your life, that you can be thankful for? See, I believe there is one way to redeem even the dark days, and that is to bring in the bright light of God's grace. Have you prayed about it? Have you consulted God about it? And if you do this with sincerity, you might be surprised at the results. Remember that life always has to be lived forwards, but it can only be understood when we look backwards. Because so much, we don't know what lies in front of us. But what has God done? What things has He protected me from? What ways has He been trying to speak to me? In what ways has He blessed me? So you do need to take time in your prayers to do a magnetic sweep through the hard times of your life. And you'll be surprised by more of God's gold. Perhaps more than any other thing, we should be thankful to God for Jesus Christ. Do you realize the great sacrifice that He made for us? But how often do we just thank Him? How often do we just thank other people? You know you like to be thanked by someone. Someone that just has the kindness to say, well, thank you. The Gospel of Luke tells about 10 lepers who were healed by Jesus. 9 of them went on their merry way, but one, just one, came back to express his gratitude for the wonderful gift of healing that Jesus had given him. Paul Harvey tells about an old man who lived on the eastern seacoast of Florida. And every Friday, until his death in 1973, this old man would return to the pier that was there out over the water. He would walk slowly and slightly stooped with a large bucket of shrimp. And he would take that shrimp and throw it in the air as the seagulls would flock, and he would feed them. Many years before, you see, in 1942, when Captain Eddie Rickenbacker was a young man, he was on a mission in a B 17 to deliver an important message to General Douglas MacArthur in New Guinea. But there was an unexpected detour which would hurt Captain Eddie and would hurl him into the most harrowing situation of his entire life. Somewhere over the Pacific during that World War II, that airplane, the Flying Fortress that he was on, became lost and out of reach of radio. And fuel then ran dangerously low, and they had to eventually ditch the plane. For nearly a month, Captain Eddie and his companions would fight the water and the weather and the waves and the scorching sun. They spent sleepless nights recoiling as giant sharks rammed their raft, the largest raft, and it was only 9 feet and by 5. But the biggest shark was 10 foot long. But of all their enemies at sea, one proved most formidable, and that was starvation. 8 days out, the rations were long gone, destroyed by the salt water, and it would take a miracle to sustain them. But a miracle occurred. In Captain Eddie's own words, Cherry, that was the B 17 pilot, Captain William Cherry, read the service that afternoon, and we finished with a prayer for deliverance and a hymn of praise. There was some talk, but it tapered off in the oppressive heat. With my hat pulled down over my eyes to keep out the glare of the sun, I dozed off. Suddenly, Captain Rickenbacker says, something landed on my head, and I knew that it was a seagull. And I don't know how I knew, I just knew. And everyone else knew too. No one said a word, but peering out from underneath my cap and its brim, without moving my head, I could see the expression on their faces. They were staring at the gull. The gull meant food, if I could catch it. And the rest, as they say, is history. Because Captain Eddie did catch the gull. They ate its flesh, and they used its intestines as bait to catch fish. And the survivors were sustained and their hopes renewed because of a lone seagull, which was uncharacteristically hundreds of miles from land. But it became a sacrifice. And you know that Captain Eddie made it. And now you also know that he never forgot, because he was that man who every Friday evening about sunset on a lonely stretch of that eastern Florida seacoast you could see him, an old man walking, white haired and bushy eyebrowed, slightly bent, his bucket filled with shrimp to feed the seagulls. To remember that one which on a day long past gave itself without a struggle, like the manna in the wilderness that God provided his people. And you see, that's the way that we should remember the sacrifice that Jesus Christ made for us. He voluntarily gave his life so that our sins could be forgiven, so that he could have a conversation with Nicodemus one day and say to that wise Jewish ruler, you need to become born again. You need to start over like a child. And you need to be transformed. You need a new life in Christ. That is the point of Christianity. It's not about us. It's about him. So why not sweep with the magnet of your love and your heart and give thanks to God for the gold in your life? And do another sweep over the hard times in your life and still give God the thanks for the surprising things that you'll find there. And do a third sweep and give thanks to God for the things of Jesus Christ in your life today. For Jesus and for his word and for his church and this church family, and most of all, for the healings and the blessings that we have already received.